In 1987, a man you never heard of named Steven Hoffenberg met with everyone's favorite person, the infamous Jeffrey Epstein. Their plan? To build the biggest Ponzi scheme the world has ever seen. This was before Epstein had a private island, and probably before his operation with underage girls began. And the way these two were introduced? By a British arms dealer in intelligence assets, Sir Douglas Leese. Almost immediately, Epstein and Hoffenberg hit it off. They shared an obsession with making money at all cost. And to Hoffenberg, Epstein was a genius with quote, no moral compass, end quotes. Exactly the guy he was looking for. Together, the dynamic duo joined forces in Hoffenberg's company called Towers Financial Corporation, a very unassuming name that doesn't make you think twice, and they turned it into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. They traveled the world together, wining and dining investors, selling bonds, and doing everything respectable businessmen are expected to do. Outside, the company was marketed as a debt collection agency, but on the inside, it was a classic Ponzi scheme. By 1993, Hoffenberg and Epstein had scammed over 200,000 investors out of $450 million, almost $1 billion in today's money. They had stolen from everyone, teachers, the elderly, businesses, you name it, they scammed it. At the time, it was the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. It wouldn't be for another 10 years until Bernie Madoff came along and took that title away from them. They made millions. And when the scheme was finally exposed, Hoffenberg took the fall and went to prison. But Epstein? He escaped without a single charge and up to $100 million in the bank. The worst financial fraud in history at the time made Epstein a 9-figure millionaire, and he got off without warning. And many believe that this is where Epstein got his initial money. That this Ponzi scheme was the seed money, the nest egg, that Epstein would use to fund his most infamous business yet. An international operation recording the most powerful people in the world committing some of the most heinous crimes a man can commit. If it wasn't for this Ponzi scheme, Epstein may never have gotten the initial boost he needed to finagle his way into the upper echelons of society. This is the Towers Financial Ponzi scheme. Towers Financial Corporation was created in the 1970s by Hoffenberg as a debt collection agency. Here's what that means. People would end up owing money to things like hospitals, phone companies, and banks, but they wouldn't pay. Hospitals, phone companies, and banks would try to chase them down for the money, but it would be a lot of work, and after a while, they would just give up on it. So instead of just losing all the money, these companies would sell that debt to a debt collection agency like Towers Financial Corporation for pennies on the dollar. The debt collection agency would then work their magic to collect the money from those people. And since they bought the debt for pennies on the dollar, any money they did collect would be very profitable. Or at least that's what Towers Financial was doing on the outside. To outsiders, Steven Hoffenberg was the epitome of the American dream. He started his business with just $2,000 and turned it into an almost $100 million business. It looked like American entrepreneurship at its finest. It even had a couple of subsidiaries also involved in the debt collection business. Compared to other businesses in the same industry, Towers was generally an under-the-radar small-time corporation that no one paid any attention to. That was until our friend Epstein joined the team. Then things went downhill fast. When Epstein joined Towers in 1987, as Steven Hoffenberg's right-hand man, the company started making some big moves. They bought 2 Illinois insurance companies, sold bonds for the companies to investors, and used that money to try to take over an airline, Pan American Airways. Ultimately, the deal failed, and a lot of money was lost. But strangely enough, Hoffenberg and Epstein didn't face any real backlash. The investors didn't complain too much. And this got them thinking. If they could get away with losing millions of their investors' money, why couldn't they lose that money into their own pockets? If nothing happened after the Pan Am disaster, what if they could continue losing money on failed business deals while really pocketing that money for themselves? They could make millions. And with Towers Financial's long-standing reputation as a real debt collection agency, it would be like taking candy from a baby. So, a Ponzi scheme was born. In order to get people interested in investing in a Ponzi scheme, you need to make it look legit. And that's exactly what Towers Financial appeared to be. By 1987, the company had been around for 17 years. It had a clean track record, minus the Pan Am disaster, but overall it looked like a perfectly trustworthy business. One of the ways Towers made money was through bonds. It would sell a bond to an investor, promising to pay them a certain amount of interest over a period of time. Then on a specified date after paying all the interest, Towers would pay back the investor's original money. It's a practice used by many companies all over the world to raise money to expand their business. But according to Hoffenberg, he and Epstein saw an opportunity like never before. What if they could cook the books a little bit? You know, fudge the numbers to make it seem like they were making more money than they actually did. That would attract investors way more. So that's exactly what they did. From 1988, Towers Financial Corporation went on a bond selling spree. And instead of showing investors the company's real finances, Epstein and Hoffenberg would use all the debt they bought for dirt cheap as their assets. For example, they would buy $1 million worth of debt from a hospital for $50,000. But instead of listing the asset as $50,000 on their balance sheets, they would list it as the original $1 million. All of a sudden, instead of having $50,000 in assets, the company now had $1 million, at least in the eyes of investors. It was a stupidly easy way to make the company go from being worth a few million to a few billion on paper. And let's face it, most of these debts were never going to be paid, so in reality, the company was worth orders of magnitude less than what our two Ponzi schemers advertised. But people fell for it. Epstein was too charismatic, too cunning, too convincing, and the reputation Hoffenberg had created for Towers meant everything looked very real. It was a match made in heaven. Using his Wall Street connections, Epstein sold Towers Financial bonds to anyone and everyone. Over the course of 6 years, the company made over $450 million from duping investors in this manner. And once the money started flowing in, the rest of the Ponzi scheme fell into place. One of the first indicators that something was off at Towers Financial was the fact that Stephen Hoffenberg was in charge of almost every position. He was the founder, chairman, CEO, and the president of the company. In fact, Towers didn't even have a financial manager because Hoffenberg was just that good. This also meant that no one was there to oversee any of the financial decisions the company made, which meant that Hoffenberg and Epstein were free to pocket that money as they pleased. They would continue selling bonds to investors based on those fake financial reports. They claimed to be collecting 30% of the debt they bought when the real number was closer to 3%. Then they would use the money they made from selling more bonds to pay back earlier investors, so the scheme kept going. And while doing that, they would make sure that a good chunk of it disappeared into their own pockets. Earlier investors were happy, they were happy, and new investors couldn't wait to get in. It was an insanely lucrative business, and Hoffenberg would use that money to fund equally crazy spending sprees. He bought houses in Manhattan, Florida. He bought luxury cars, yachts, several planes. At one point, he even tried to buy the New York Post newspaper. Neither Epstein nor Hoffenberg cared who they were stealing from. It could be millionaires or 84-year-old retired teachers. They worked hard for their money and they were gonna spend it. And it was all thanks to Epstein's planning and execution. According to Hoffenberg, Epstein was the quote architect behind the scam, end quotes. And Epstein allegedly made off with $100 million of the money for himself. But then the SEC got involved, and without warning, just as the walls were starting to close in on Towers Financial, Epstein jumped ship, taking his cut with them. Stephen Hoffenberg had gotten a little too confident, and he attracted a little too much attention by trying to buy and save the dying New York Post. His knight in shining armor act attracted too many eyeballs, and one of those eyeballs was the SEC, and they got to wondering how he made his money. It didn't take a genius to figure out something was wrong, and from there things came crashing down. In February 1993, the SEC began civil action against Towers Financial Corporation, and a month later the company declared bankruptcy. The feds were onto him, but Epstein, he was long gone. Hoffenberg was the fall guy. Everything got pinned on him. Epstein had came in, won his trust, used Hoffenberg's company for his own gain, and left it as it was burning to the ground. And for it, Hoffenberg got sentenced to 20 years in jail in 1997 when he was 52 years old. He wouldn't see the outside of his cell for the next 18 years. In 2013, Hoffenberg was released, but up until today, he's still paying out the $462 million, or around $750 million in today's money, he owes to his victims. Back when the case against Towers Financial was still ongoing, two other high-level executives were sentenced to 7 and 9 years for their participation in the scheme. But Epstein, the architect behind the scam, the genius with no moral compass, he wasn't one of them. Somehow, he got away without a single charge. From that point on, Epstein would use that Ponzi scheme money to slither his way into the most powerful circles in the world, eventually setting up his operation where he would bring powerful, wealthy people to his properties to party, have underage girls there, and record all these powerful men with the girls via secret hidden cameras. And every time he got in trouble with the law, the same pattern would play out. He would be left free without any trouble. It was almost as if he had a guardian angel looking over him to make sure he could keep doing what he was doing. In 2006, Epstein would get arrested on charges of soliciting a prostitute and for procuring a minor for prostitution. Magically, he ended up getting the deal of a lifetime, with even the judge admitting that he was told Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence, end quotes, that Epstein's purpose was, quote, above his pay grade, end quotes, and that he had to, quote, leave it alone, end quotes. Belong to intelligence, huh? It would make sense. Hoffenberg did meet Epstein through a British arms dealer in intelligence assets. Was Epstein really an undercover operative, getting blackmail material on the rich and powerful for some intelligence agency? That is exactly what we go over in our new feature-length documentary on Epstein called The Man That Didn't Kill Himself, which is out now. And guys, I'm very proud of this one, it's really good. All you have to do is click the join button below to watch now, because this video would definitely get demonetized if I published it. And if you join and don't think it's worth it, all you have to do is email me and I will personally refund you the money. Plus, when you join, you'll get access to our previous and future private documentaries coming out every month. Click that join button below to watch now.